Hello, social workers, mental health professionals, and change agents. Welcome to another episode of season 6 of the Social Work Rants podcast. I'm your host, Bash Moreno. Saludos a todos. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, tapping in wherever you are watching or listening to this podcast. Uh, Thank you for everybody for your support. Gracias a todos por su apoyo. Wherever you are watching, you watch on YouTube or listen to any audio platform. Definitely continue to follow the podcast on all social media, starting with Instagram at the Social Work Rants Podcast. That's all one word. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Social Work Rants, all one word, and hit the like button on Facebook, aka Meta. Type in the Social Work Rants Podcast and hit that like button. And of course, on YouTube, hit that red subscribe button. So thank you for tuning in and tapping in. This episode is brought to you by Bat City Entertainment, your home for online holistic self-care featuring poetry and online Zumba classes. The first Zumba class of 2023 coming Sunday, February 19th at 12 p.m. Go to bassmoreno.com for your tickets, and it'll be a lot of fun. In Dallas, Texas, I'll be at Dallas, Texas for Latinx and Social Work Summit, featuring the book of my fellow co-authors of the bestseller Latinx and Social Work Volume 2. We'll be doing a summit, so I'll put the link to the tickets in the show notes. Dallas, we are coming. So, as you know, this is my second, third episode to talk about school social work. We have a wonderful, talented social worker, Alyssa, coming from Chicago. Finally got Chi-Town. I think I finally able to check off Illinois as one of my states. I want to interview a social worker in every state. That's my goal. So,
Right.
Chicago's been hot market. We hear on the news all the time about the violence that's been happening. The mayor who if you the saying goes, all skin folk ain't kinfolk, whatever that saying is. I think she ranks in the top. Right. From just watching the news, and I like to not just get all my facts from the news. I like to boots on the ground. So what better way than have a school social worker in the great city of Chicago? Alyssa, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you come on, and if there's some brief technical difficulties, we rocking and rolling. But I think I struck a nerve with the talking about the mayor. I mean, we'll get into it, but
Yep. Chicago's great to work in.
so for those who don't know who you are or what you do now, wonderful talents, wonderful field, social work, interesting field. Let people know who you are, what you do.
Yeah. So again, my name is Alyssa. I am a certified school social work specialist within the Chicago Public Schools district. I have been an employee for the district for this is my 6th year. So rounding out the end of my 6th year as we head in to June. I work right now with kindergarten through 8th grade students that have general education and what we call resource or separate setting educations, special education services. I have also worked in what we call significantly modified curriculum classrooms, supporting life skills and foundational functional communication skills for kids pre-K through 8th grade. And I also worked at a specialty school for medically fragile students for students at that time were kindergarten through 5th grade. So those were students that had a wide variety of medical needs, as well as social, emotional needs. And I'm also a Chicago Teachers Union delegate. So I am working actively within my union to create a sustainable model of schools for both not only just educators and our schools, but also our students. So yeah, those are what I do in my school role for the most part. Oh, and I do bilingual assessments for pre-K students and early intervention students as they transition into preschool.
In other words, you can't wait till June to enjoy your summer vacation.
Yeah, I'm excited for June. We're excited, but yeah, so that's my day to day is citywide assessments, K through 8 school social worker, and then CTU delegate.
I think I just got some burnout just listening to all that. How do you do all that? Like what is a day in, day out look like for you?
First, no 2 days are alike. So within the city of Chicago, and the way that it works is we are all assigned, we are considered citywide district employees. So I am an employee of a district. I am not tied directly to a school. I am assigned to a homeschool. And I work in a absolutely amazing school with an incredibly supportive admin. I am extremely lucky and extremely blessed. I work with a wide variety of different teachers and different ages of teachers. And then so that is what I do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. And so I work right now. I have 50 students on my direct service caseload on top of helping to serve the social emotional tier 1 and tier 2 support. So anywhere from an additional 50 to 80 kids in a single week that I am supporting as we go through it. I do goal implementation for students in special education, building foundational life skills, functional communication, social emotional expression, coping skills, and all of that. I do trauma work. Trying to think of some of the other things that I do. I do artwork. I do like art therapy. I'm not a certified art therapist though, but I have some techniques that we do with students. A lot of play-based assessments and therapies. And then on Thursdays, I work with a bilingual team, and we are a team of all clinicians, psychologists, social worker, speech and language pathologist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, case manager, special education teacher. And we assess 2-year-olds that got early intervention services that were identified through the state as meeting developmental delay criteria in some capacity. We're given some type of services. We assess to see if they need special education and or a special education preschool classroom. And then we write the IEP and we do all the assessments in 3 hours. And I do 2 of those on Thursdays with my team in Spanish. And then we translate out in English to those of our teammates who don't speak Spanish. And then once a month, I meet with the Chicago Teachers Union delegates at our House of Delegates meeting. The other month, I do a joint action committee with the Chicago Public Schools as well as the Teachers Union for special education services, and how can we make them more sustainable, and how do we improve our practice as a whole, as well as holding the district accountable to making sure that we are getting the resources that our students need. Yeah, and then I am also preparing to maybe try and see if I want to do like private practice on the side eventually. But that is what my day-to-day looks like. On any given day, I'm running anywhere from 4 individual sessions to include then maybe 3 or 4 group sessions with groups of students for 2 to 5 kids at max. So yeah, you name it, I'm doing it in one day.
Wow, just the IEPs alone is fascinating, and to translate. But being a bilingual social worker is like I think it's like another level of burnout that doesn't get talked about as much, in our field. Like it is taxing. It is a lot of work. Obviously, immigration's been a huge topic for a long, long time, and we still having people migrate day in, day out. And I know when I was working as a school social worker, they're coming in literally fresh, not even a couple weeks into the country, and try to set up, register for school, register the kids for school, and just kind of give the lay of the land of what the district is about, and get resources, then try to then finding out that they can't read in Spanish, so now you got to do figure out how to like for me, I was a district school social worker, so I had to do like home visits on top of that, and go see the parents, or try to see the parents and let them know what's going on in the district. So because they can't read or write in their native language, so it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's definitely gotten even more interesting, at least in the city of Chicago. So we have seen an influx in Ukrainian students since the Ukraine and Russian conflict has started. So we have seen schools that are kind of on the edge of the city, and we have a neighborhood called Ukrainian Village. We have seen those areas kind of boom with students that are coming and their families are coming directly from Ukraine, and having to meet their needs, enrolling them, getting them a wide variety of services. And then as well as we have been one of the cities that have been sent the buses up from Texas and from Florida. And so we have had an even larger influx of our Spanish speaking families and immigration that have immigrated from various parts of Central America, South America, and Mexico, and just trying to meet their needs, because obviously we all know that journey to get here is not an easy one. And if you're a child going through that, how do you support that, as well as that language barrier?
Right.
And how do we just like start from scratch? How do you get these families everything that they need and also make them feel like the school is here to support them, and it's not like we're criticizing them or like judging them for whatever means and whatever reasons they are here now. And so we're also lucky we're a sanctuary city, so we don't have to worry about having any type of conversation centered around status or anything like that. It's like, as long as you have the documentation, we are here, and we are open arms, and we are willing to accept and help our students.
Well, that is great for being a sanctuary city and providing that because obviously with the immigration is always a fear of deportation, and I kind of deal with that at a little bit of my role where I'm at now, and working with a lot of immigrants, South America and also from Haiti. So yeah, I definitely see that. So, man, it's like you really need. I think that President's Day weekend can I come soon enough for you? And
Yeah,
and Memorial Day weekend can't come soon enough. So,
spring break is before that.
oh
Yeah, no,
yes,
we're good at making sure that we take advantage of those break times, because they're definitely earned for all of the educators in my district, and I'm sure across the country and further. But yeah, we're ready for our 3-day weekend coming up.
so like I touched on like all the when we see on the news or the gun violence that's been happening in Chicago, and the mayor occasionally does a good thing and then like kind of like it's like one step forward and like 5 steps backwards, depending who you ask. But from your perspective, you're working and living in Chicago. What's the real deal that's going on in the city?
Yeah, I think Chicago by nature is incredibly segregated as well. We have a long history of what used to be redlining and just staying within the culture and community that felt comfortable for you and most welcoming for you. So I think when you're talking to anybody from the city of Chicago, knowing where they live is incredibly powerful, as well as how much they actually know and how many other people they know throughout the city. I grew up on the north side, so I live 2 blocks away now from Wrigley Field where the Cubs play. I have always grown up in this neighborhood. But I went to Whitney Young, which is kind of now in what we call this area the West Loop. It was not the West Loop when I went to high school. But then like I was able to meet peers that lived across the entire city. And I mean, the Hallmark Inglewood, which is where you typically hear a lot of that violence, West Garfield Park, North Lawndale, Hyde Park, just like all of these different neighborhoods that have different voices and different needs. I would be lying to say that the violence is not portrayed accurately in the news. I think you guys as a country, right, you hear about these like Hallmark weekends where you hear, oh, X amount of things happen, this happened, this happened, this happened. And that unfortunately in some neighborhoods is just like the weekly norm. A lot of it for us, when I get text messages from friends, I went to school out in Jersey, I went to Rutgers. And I have friends that will text me and be like, oh my God, is everything okay? And I'm like, yeah, it was a normal weekend. Like, I'm not exactly sure why the news decided that this was the weekend they were going to highlight it. Maybe
Right.
a certain weekend. I don't even know. But we definitely as a district feel the impact of that. I myself have lost students to the gun violence in the city. I have worked with colleagues, even this year, who have lost students, and just learning how to rally around that, but also how do you support your school community when you lose someone? We've lost educators this year, to the gun violence in the city. So how do you turn around on Monday knowing your colleague is no longer there, and then have to uplift and hold a school together in that same time? Um, and so I think what I have learned in my practice as a school social worker is that grief work is incredibly powerful, and incredibly difficult. And it was something that I definitely took for granted and didn't do enough work when I was like as an intern. It didn't really I didn't really internalize it. I didn't really focus much on it. I was hyper focused on working with kids and, trying to get all of that experience. And on the back end of that, starting my career, I had to do a lot of education around how do you work with grief and how do you work with traumatic grief? How do you support that in real time? Because I don't think a textbook is really going to ever do what you need to walk into a building knowing that a student passed or that a parent of a student passed. And I have many colleagues that I have worked with in other school buildings, that we have sustained those losses and we continue to sustain them. And how do we work towards actually making the city a better place so that we are not doing that on a weekly basis, because it is a weekly basis in some places. And then how are we also empowering those communities to take advantage of services to kind of support sustainability in those neighborhoods and making it a better place where people can have access to more things to feel more comfortable. So yeah, it's very nuanced. I think working in the city of Chicago, you have to be prepared to advocate and advocate very hard for what your students need. And that means that the school is, it's up there as a priority, but the community being really given the resources necessary to allow school to be just a school building. I think that is definitely something that a lot of us take to heart. Our kids don't just come to school just to learn anymore. Some of them are using it as a safe haven, as a meal plan, a lot more than what is just basic teaching. And it's not basic teaching by any stretch of the imagination, because
Right.
miracles every day.
Yes.
But they're doing much more than that. And then, when you're one person in a building with 500 kids or 900 kids, how do you meet the needs of all of those kids plus all of the teachers?
You said a lot, and I just want to break that down. Number one, my condolences for dealing with it, all that grief. It's kind of hitting home for me because I had to deal with that during COVID and losing clients and making those phone calls to family members and offering condolences like left and right. Like it was a crazy time. And then how do you deal with that while still working?
I go to therapy. I shout out to all the therapists of the therapists. Yeah, I have a very strong self-care routine, and everybody that knows me will tell you that I don't think self-care is like some luxury. It is a discipline, it is an art form, and it is an ever evolving practice and journey. I have to set very firm boundaries with myself, and that some days can be really hard. So I go to the gym. I have a trainer that I'm fortunate enough that works with me. I have my therapist. I have my support system and my colleagues, and we create spaces that we can talk. But then we also create spaces where we're not talking about this anymore. We have to be more than just a social worker or an educator in a school building. We've got to lean into other parts of ourselves. And I think that is how you just learn to make it sustainable, is you learn how to build boundaries around it and find ways to cope with some of those really heavy moments that happen.
No, yeah, and I'm glad you have that support system. The other thing that struck me was I follow this principal. He's in my native Bronx. He's actually the principal of one of the elementary schools I used to go to, and he talks a lot about community work and bringing the community together, and he'll literally call up the housing project across the street from, and if he knows like the elevator's not working, like he knows those kids that live in that building are not coming to school, and so obviously with attendance, rates and stuff like that he's responsible for. He's like, I'm calling, like, you're affecting my community, my school community, but you're affecting the community as a whole. So he'll literally reach out, contact, whoever owns the building, like, hey, like, when are you gonna fix the elevator, or he does a lot of stuff within the community, like, coat drives and things like that. So you mentioning what you mentioned, it kind of reminds me of him, of what he's doing for not only his school community, but just the community surrounding the school. So just a parallel, similar. You just reminded me of him.
Yeah, I think New York and Chicago, as well as a lot of other districts, have a lot of parallels where educators who thought they were going into a building just to teach and or support the educators in that building, that is not the case. It's a much more nuanced conversation when we're talking about our students and their needs and what their families need to get to school and to make it through a school day.
Now I know SEL is a big topic, and I kind of like COVID kind of highlighted even more, and I noticed teachers who've been teaching forever, put it that way, they're like, not against it, but it's like you have these trainings and the PD days, and I don't think the schools in general maximize those PD days and really do the trainings that they're supposed to do. To kind schools kind of went back to like pre-pandemic, of like, here's the homework, is this and that, and it's like, but like, these we just went through a whole pandemic. Kids are like grieving losses. People like are hungry. People like kids are not having Wi-Fi in their house, and or it doesn't matter what cable service you have, like no Wi-Fi is gonna work in their house to do their work, and it's like coming back to school, and first year back in the school building full time, and mass and unmasked, and winter break, we're gonna do mass for 2 weeks and this and that. But going back to the teachers, is like I saw the old school teachers as well not wanting to, or kind of hesitant to do SEL. Do you see that where you work at?
Yeah, I think you see it across the district. I definitely have seen it in the schools that I've worked in since coming back from remote learning, right? I support more than one school sometimes, and so I've seen it across a wide variety of schools. I think the shift to include social emotional learning is just different in a lot of ways, because for a long time, the idea of going to school was you sat in your desk for however many hours, you took your tests, you didn't, there was no fighting back, there was no talking back, there was none of this. And then you kind of get a bunch of students who either started their educational careers completely at home with their parents trying to make ends. And then there were students that just experienced so much. And like, how do you find a balance between that? And I think you definitely see who takes that work to heart and who maybe finds it more of the struggle. I think you can also see it in their classrooms and the way that it plays out in the rooms and the way that the different supports are ended up needed throughout the year in those classrooms. And yeah, so we've definitely seen, all ends of the spectrum of teachers who like kind of went all in and were like super, super, super only about SEL. And then you were kind of like, yeah, that's great. But like, we also do have to teach them how to make boundaries, right? Like, and you just letting them kind of do whatever they want in the classroom isn't working. And then we saw the exact opposite, where teachers were like, well, nothing should be changed. So just like come to school and do what you got to do. And then trying to like get them to understand, someone may need more time to get through this, that social anxiety, anything. I mean, we're talking the spectrum of mental health concerns. that come back from being in a home environment. And so, yeah, we see it all for sure. And all of the different levels of where people want to actually meet it and don't want to meet it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was fascinating to kind of sit back and see that, and or having administrators be like, hang out with a kid and kind of be like a babysitter. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not here to babysit the kids, and like, all right, and trying to figure out with little resources, figure out how to like do a session with a 5-year-old that's like, and the school setting is not appropriate, and I saw that like my first meeting was like, kid, it's not supposed to be in the school, like, and
Yeah.
like no, and having that resistance from other staff and administrators, and it's like I was so done.
Yeah. Or like when you're looking at someone and you're like, you're yelling at a 5-year-old. It's still, and like, they've never gone to preschool. Like, they have no understanding of what this thing called a classroom is. Like, how do you teach that?
Yeah,
Like, when for them, kindergarten was staring at a screen
yeah,
and it looks like YouTube. Like, and now the YouTube character is actually a real teacher. Like, there's a difference there.
yeah, yeah. So I think we the school system in America is in it for a long haul. We just touching the surface as what the impact of COVID has had on all the kids,
Oh, yeah.
from pre-K through senior year of high school, even in college too. So it's just, I envy everybody that works in the school. Is like,
Yeah, I don't know if we're still sane at this point, but we're trying.
I think you can't be completely sane to work in the school, especially nowadays.
Yeah, I would agree.
So talking to COVID, how was that like for you, working in school, and then shutdown happened, and doing the whole remote learning and coming back? What was your experience like?
That was an experience. So I think when you talk about the 2019-2020 school year in CPS, it is just a lot. In October of 2019, so like that fall before COVID hit,
Mm-hmm.
we were on strike for 11 days. And so that was like 11 school days. So that didn't include weekends. So it was 3 weeks where students were not in school. We were picketing and doing whatever. So that disrupted instruction for a
So
while.
why were you guys on strike?
That would take a whole other podcast or in
Or like
itself.
a synopsis of why? Because it's important, because
Yeah.
you're the first that I've seen or heard that work in the school, and been on strike, and shoot, I even picketed as a kid when when I was in school, so I know a little bit, of doing that. So what was that like for you? Or
So, what was it like? It was the most emotionally draining thing to like know that you are fighting for what you truly believe in as educators, right? Smaller class size. And so just so you have an idea, as a social worker, we still fall under the teachers union. So I am still under contract as like a teacher, as well as all of my other colleagues that are clinicians across the board in the district, plus teachers. Um, and so it was like smaller class size, better schools. We wanted more sustainable concrete language and projects to help our STLS, students in transitional living services, so our unhoused student population. We have a significant number. We fought and won for a school social worker, a 1-to-1 ratio in every school, which has increased our numbers within my district to over 600. And to put it this way, when I started in CPS, I was one of like 200 something social workers. So to see that number just explode, a nurse in every school building every day, a 1-to-1 nurse to a school, because finding a nurse at a school in CPS is considered a unicorn and a miracle.
Wow.
Yeah, they have like 5 or 6 schools that they report to throughout the week, so it's like a whole thing. And then trying to find language on supports to better strengthen special education policies. I mean, it's a wide range, but that was basically what we were trying to fight for. How do we gain a contract that is equitable for us as educators, but also we're bargaining for the common good, for the students and the families of Chicago. And I think that's kind of like where the heart of it was. When you look at a lot of it, people, like if you look at a lot of news articles and stuff, there's a lot of confusion because we were technically offered the maximum raise before the strike even started from the mayor. But at that time, we were unable to bargain over work environment. Basically, it was just over salary, and that was like a state law that we had to fight and change. And it is changed now. We can bargain over these other areas that impact our schools, but at the time it was like we, as a district of employees, did not want to accept a salary raise unless it included other words and benefits that strengthened the actual school buildings that we were in. So that was that. And so
Which
that
make-
was like,
which makes sense because it doesn't matter how much money you make if your building is crap
shocking.
or
Um, I mean, like, to put it this way, we had to like argue with them to allow students in preschool to take naps if they were in a full day program, even though that's considered like a state law mandate. Just to give you a frame of reference there, for some of the things. And then so that was what we were striking for. It was 11 days. That's just a whole range of things. And then we continued on to go back into our school buildings, and we all kind of like thought we were in this like routine, right? You get through winter break, you're like, great, we're back, we're at the second half of the year. And then we were sent home on the 14th or 15th. It was like a Friday, and I'll never forget it. Because we were all convinced that there was no way we were going to be shut down. We knew that that the teachers union and the district has kind of a contentious relationship because the mayor and the strike and everything. And so we were all like, she's not going to shut us down. This is not going to be a thing. The other districts in the state of Illinois were starting to say we're going to go remote for 2 weeks, and we were being told that we were reporting. It didn't matter. And then the governor had to pull a state mandate that moved us all remote for 2 weeks because we were going to be going in regardless of what other districts were doing. And to give a frame of reference, so my highest boss is actually the mayor. We do not have a school elected or like a
superintendent.
So we don't have a superintendent. We have a CEO. But the CEO is appointed by the mayor, and we do not have an elected school board. It is all appointed by the mayor. We this past year had to do a lot of organizing. Well, it's been a long sustained argument and battle through Illinois policy and law to get it so that we will have an elected school board. And it'll be like an evolving thing, but for now it's all mayoral controlled. And so she makes those final decisions, which is why when you bring up Lori Lightfoot, it is always just an interesting kind of thing because the teachers union and her don't get along. You can Google it. It's a whole thing. And so the governor shut us down for 2 weeks. We went home under the impression that we were going to be gone for 2 weeks. They extended it to spring break, and then like we basically never went back. We didn't get any guidance on how to work with kids. Like we weren't even initially as a district allowed to work with kids remotely because it was just such a foreign thing.
Right.
And then it was, you could do group stuff, but you couldn't be in one-on-one with a Zoom for a student. So as a social worker, it was really hard because some of my students I do see individually. Then we were given permissions to do that. And it was just kind of like this evolving thing through the end of that school year of 1920. And then we started remote for 2021. And we were remote all the way up through winter break. And then we started a slow wave, which also led to some work actions of withholding labor as a union to make it so that we were given access, because we were told to report in buildings for our most um, fragile and complex students. So our students that were in those significantly modified curriculum classrooms were told to report, as well as preschool students. And this was before vaccines were readily available to any educators. And so we were
Wow.
going in, and I mean, yes, the intention was to have them masked, but the reality is, if anyone who works with students with cognitive impairments and
Yes.
disabilities or a preschool kid, trying to get them all to wear masks during that time was different.
Yes.
So yeah, so that's how it went. And then we had a slow and gradual phase back to everybody coming back in person. And we started in person for the school year 21-22. Yeah, so we were remote from March 2020 up until, for the majority of kids in CPS, up until March of 2021. So we were remote for a full 12 months.
Wow.
Mhm. And that included like summer programming and summer school.
That's fascinating, but that's the reality of everything. And so you got my struggles were the kindergarteners and first graders. They came in and it was like and a lot of it because of, like you mentioned before, like not really having that pre-K because or experience, or they did and it was shut down for
Mhm.
whether it be for COVID or whatever reasons, and they coming in without those initial skills, they
Oh, yeah, those foundational skills.
foundational skills, and it was just they ran
Wild time.
they ran to school.
They were excited about it, which was great, but it was like teaching all of those kids, but then also teaching older students like how to be back in a building.
Yeah.
We had jokes all the time. We would have like third, fourth, and fifth graders, and they would just stand up in the middle of class and walk out of the room. And teachers would be like no behavior. Like it was just like they would just stand up and walk out, right? And the teacher would be like, where are you going? And oh, I'm going to the bathroom. But they were so used to just turning their camera off and like walking to the
Right.
bathroom that they were like, oh, I didn't even think that I had to like tell you I was going to the bathroom. So like even like that small stuff, like that
Yeah.
had nothing to do with behavior. We were like, we are just starting from scratch here for everybody. Yeah.
That's funny, but that's real though,
Oh,
because
yeah. Our kids would be like, why can't I have a snack? And because you just ate. Why do you need a snack right now? Like that is why. So just I mean, hilarious. Like some of that stuff is you have to laugh at it, otherwise you're just gonna cry through all of it. But yeah, I mean,
yeah.
just getting back to it was hilarious, and it was a struggle, and I think we're still kind of working through that, because even last year we had all of the different quarantines. If you tested positive, right? Like if a whole class, anyone who was unvaccinated, we and stuff like that. And so I mean, it was just like the spectrum of trying to teach kids the stability of a school building when we really had none. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting time, and shout out to again everybody who works in a school. I I did my year and a half, and I did a whole episode about it. I'm retired from social work. It's not for me, and I think that's something I had to learn, and that's for anybody in the field. Like, hey, just do it, and if you like it, great, kudos to you. If you don't like it, well, that now you know
Mhm.
a field not to get into, and so. It took 20 years, and it was like, okay, that's not, it's not for me. I did it, and it's just not. And I know I looked up in the sky every day, like looking like, Ma, I don't know how you did 15 years. I did.
For sure.
So, you mentioned a couple of neighborhoods in Chicago, and despite all the violence that we see and hear, Chicago is a fascinating, hot real estate market in certain areas. That there was like, I think you mentioned Highland Park, like, or one of the Highlands,
There is a
there's a
Highland Park, but that's just outside the city, but there's
okay,
Hyde Park in the city, which
yes,
is like
yeah,
it's like where the University of Chicago is,
yeah.
basically.
So and Obama's doing like a library around there. So
That's a little further south. Yeah, that's Jackson Park. But yeah, those are all kind of in the same area on the south side there, for sure.
yeah, so it's basically areas of being like gentrified and being all nice and pretty, and even the Chicago Bears, for the sports fans, their stadium. I saw on LinkedIn they're talking about renovating it again. I mean, it was just renovated a couple years ago, and trying to make it like, is it like they're trying to build like a mall next to it, and like connect it to the subway station? Like I saw the
Something
design.
like that. I'm not too sure what they're trying to do because it's also like literally right on the lake. So like I don't know like what they're planning to try and do. But yeah, there is talk about that. And if you haven't seen the renovations, it's very obvious of what they added when they first renovated, because it looks like there's a spaceship that landed on top of Soldier Fields. And that's how you know that they renovated it. So I'm not sure what else they're going to contribute to this, but yes. Well,
But
we do make fun of it. It looks like a ship landed on the, the arena. So
but no, my point is, like, we have these neighborhoods being, transformed, and we got, you mentioned having peers from different parts of the city, and you working as a district social worker, so you kind of, you're seeing that kind of like real time, all the transitions and gentrification, and that plays into dynamics of working inside the school buildings. Like how was that like for you working?
yeah, I think it's really interesting. The gentrification that happens in the city, it comes really fast in certain neighborhoods. And like,
Hmm.
so in a matter of years, you see entire communities change. It's really interesting when you start to see the gentrification kind of work its way through and you look at a school and the third, fourth, fifth, like the third through eighth graders, all of the students and families are like from what the neighborhood originally looked like, right? And they're um typically, black and brown families that have lived in these areas. And then you look at like the kindergarten and the first grade, and it's like a bunch of families that are like now white. And like you have this conversation of like, as the years go by, you see all of these families as the kids graduate, like phase out, but you start to see more and more of these white families phase in.
Right.
Um, and it's a very interesting thing because Chicago, for it being so segregated, right? You're starting to see where these areas are really just losing some of their community. And then you see all of the other kind of things that impact that. And there's a podcast also about New York. And it's like, I think it's Nice White Parents or something like that. It was a great podcast, but it talks about how these families come in to these schools that are community-based neighborhood schools, and they have the best of intentions, and they want to provide all of these resources. They want to fundraise, they want to do all of this stuff, and they have the connections to do that, except the families that were from the original neighborhood like don't necessarily get to participate in the fundraisers because they can't afford the tickets or they can't do
Mm,
things. And we see that in Chicago as well, where you have like all of these really great ideas, but then it doesn't like trickle down so that everybody in the community can participate.
right.
And then you only see gentrification in certain areas, and so you
Hmm.
only see certain schools in certain areas start to get access to better resources, and it's all driven by money. So some of those hallmark, neighborhoods that you hear about that have often, been overlooked and underfinanced and not given enough resources. They're still the food deserts that we hear about. They still don't have access to the same quality of care and educational materials. And it has nothing to do with parents not caring or not wanting it, but they just don't have the means to fundraise for it to make it happen.
Right.
Yeah. So you'll have a school that's got like every kid gets a new Chromebook every year. And then you'll have schools that are like, we've been using the same textbooks for the last 5 years because like we just don't have it in the budget to get new ones or something.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Like a big, seeing these big cities and you seeing gentrification that's happening, and then you see like this, you mentioned the redlining, and you see that the redlining that happened like years ago, how it still affects certain cities to this day, and and it's funny because you don't. I know for me, like I didn't even hear about like redlining until I would say 2019, 2020, and beginning to learn about real estate and
Mhm.
myself wanting to move, which I eventually did, moving out of state, and kind of like seeing that, hearing about that, and hear about different cities throughout the country, being redlined and zoned the way it's zoned, and
Yep.
race has a huge thing about it, and just hearing about Chicago, like the different pockets of neighborhoods that the housing market is like exploding, and it's like talking $1 million homes and neighborhoods and different and like the neighborhoods is completely changed. So it's very fascinating to see, and I've been bringing up real estate a little bit because we have uh, for anybody who works in housing, social workers who work in housing, do case management, for people that deal with housing. So kind of bringing back into like the social work aspect of why that's important, or working in schools, because I think that was another frustrating thing, because I've always worked in case management and doing home visits and stuff, and working
Mhm.
in a school is like, what is going on at home that you acting this way,
Yeah.
and you can't, there's no way to really find out like what exactly is going on at home, but something's going on somewhere, and not able to really that missing piece to try to put the puzzle together.
For sure. And within Chicago, we used to have a lot of housing developments, like a ton throughout the city, but they were all located in very specific areas. And there was like one or two on the north side, and now like it doesn't exist anymore. So everybody is that is in like Section 8 and stuff like that. Like it's very difficult to find those houses. And or like a home development that you can live in, because they're all in very specific areas. And we all know the fine line between education and social work and policy and money is your property taxes go towards the
Hmm.
schools. And
Yeah.
so more property taxes in an area versus less, then how do we think it's going to play out, on top of what's happening in the homes of our students, and it doesn't, that doesn't mean that in certain areas that are more affluent there's not things happening in those homes that can impact a kid, but it's, you really have to look at all of the different pieces to really be able to support a student um in a school. And how do we meet that need day in and day out
Right.
when there's only, for us technically, you're paid for 6.25 hours of work and that's it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really is a lot, and there's a lot of layers, and there's only so much one person could do. There's only so much, kind of like community kind of do. Is like you're fighting systems within systems, and one of the fight is worth it, but it's like you really have to peel those layers off, and sometimes you lose more than you win, but those wins are like extra satisfying. And but you guys picketing and going on strike, and you're showing your worth by doing that, and like better working conditions, and just overall care, because you guys need that. Like we still, like I said earlier, we're still dealing with the aftermath of the pandemic. Like COVID is still out there. There's RSV, there's regular cold and flu season. Like this weather is like ridiculous. Like it doesn't know what it wants to do
Yeah.
one week to the next. So like all these like cold and flu viruses that existed before COVID, like it's still out there, and we kind of took it for granted. And it's like,
Mhm.
we gotta take care of ourselves.
Yeah, 0 out of 10 recommend getting the flu. I had it like two last week. Yeah, and I was out. I missed 2 days of work because I was that sick. So yeah, you've got to learn how to advocate and fight for that, but you also have to learn how to take care of yourself. And how do you learn to take care of yourself when you by nature are willing to go to such lengths to try and advocate for the people around you? So yeah, it's walking a fine line all the time.
Another thing that off and on I hear about the news in Chicago is the drugs that's been happening. And I know Mr. El Chapo had a lot to do with that, with the insurgence of drugs, and of course now fentanyl's like kind of taking like national attention, but and mixing with anything from marijuana to like anything, and then the dangers of that. Like, what are you seeing in terms of the drugs in Chicago?
I think substance use it ranges, right? I don't see it as much in my students. I do have a couple of students that we have had to have some conversations about the choices that they make in terms of using drugs and stuff like that. The high school setting is a very, very different experience. I have colleagues that they're just like, we get kids that are experimenting or regularly using drugs. But I think across the board too, like we do see parents, right, of some of our students and family members, and sometimes the kids will come to school and talk about it. Um, it's definitely there. It's definitely real. I would be lying if I said that I've never encountered a parent that was under the influence of a substance that was controlled when they came to school, right? For even like a meeting when we're talking about their kid and like what their kid needs.
Mm.
Um, I think that it speaks to a larger issue of what is accessible in certain communities and how they're accessible and why people even kind of get into those habits to begin with, which is a very layered conversation. But yeah, we see the use. I do not see it as much in the elementary school setting, and if I do, it is um, controlled substances for students under the age of 18 for the most part. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that we are constantly talking about as a district, and how do you identify and then work with students if like we're realizing that there really is a substance, like a substance abuse concern, and finding resources and creating resources for ourselves to know how to like work with that. And I think we've had to learn a lot of those things. I think another like one that a lot of us have been talking about lately is like also like disordered eating and how to work
Mm.
with that too. And it was something that like we've always kind of had to encounter, but it's definitely becoming just more and more prevalent with the impacts of social media and stuff like that. And how do you work and identify with students who are kind of engaging in some of those things? Um, yeah.
Yeah, is 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 having two kids of my own, like, is like is scary. Like everything, like these kids are kind of like seeing, kind of try to limit what they see. Like I was at their age, like it was like nothing like this. And uh, I grew up in High Bridge, one of the most
Okay.
poorest districts in the country, one of the poorest. And it's like, I mean, yeah, I saw syringes, I saw like
Mhm.
vials of when crack cocaine was first prevalent, but and of course, occasional gunshots here and there. But like, I never like to go out anyway, so I was always in the house and kind of kept my distance and stuff, and kept my nose clean. And but it's kids nowadays with social media, and it's like you know pen, the struggles of the pandemic that we all struggling now with, and the aftermath. And just bullying and through different apps and like, do you see like no, between TikTok and Snapchat and any other apps that's out there and like kind of like having beef over that and kind of like translate to the school and then you're finding out what it is and it was like
Yep.
it's mind boggling.
Yeah. I love when my students are like, but it was on Snapchat, so it's gone. And I'm like, I don't know why anybody thinks that something on the internet is gone in 24 hours. Like they can find it. Yeah, the social media it's a special thing. I think it's very interesting for me too, because I am 31 years old. And so when I was in middle school, like 6th grade, I remember MySpace coming out. And so like I grew up with the evolution of social
Mhm.
and now I see my students as young as like 3rd grade making TikToks and stuff like that. And you're like, oh my God, like there's just such different levels to it. There's a different level of connection for students, both good and bad, I think, in
Yes.
certain ways. And then it's also like we have to do a lot of parent education,
Mhm.
right? Like parents are constantly like, well, I don't know what that app is. And I'm like, okay, well, we need to figure out what this app is. Like we need to know what it is. Um,
Yeah.
like even Roblox and like
Yeah.
Minecraft, right? Like super popular with kids. There's also a way where you can like chat with people that are just like on the internet. And so
Yes.
like you think your kid is playing a game that's like very like a cute little game or whatever,
Hmm.
but like could be connecting with someone that would be considered a predator. And how
Yes.
do you like teach them and how do you put enough safety security measures in and just like, with TikTok, like the algorithm will spit out whatever is there. And so like how do you censor that? How do you I don't envy parents at this point in raising kids because the social media thing, it is there. And I mean, I've had friends who have kids and they're like, my kid feels like they're less than because they don't have a cell phone, but they're in like 3rd grade or 4th grade.
Mm.
But it's considered to be like weird to not have a cell phone and access to
Yeah.
all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm experiencing that currently. So, I, um, yeah, I lost my train of thought. But no, it's really you mentioned MySpace. For don't know who MySpace, don't know what MySpace is. Google it. Like it was a fascinating sign. You just had to be there.
It
But
was
I love MySpace because you learn how to code and like people like
we
that's like
got
the
valuable
beginnings.
skills out of MySpace. You can't
Yeah.
tell me otherwise.
And but that was like the original like kind of like online drama like why I'm not in your top eight.
Top 8, yes. Or people would change their top 8 to a top 4. Why you need a top 4? Like, what is this? Why did you change your song to this day? What happened? Like, I mean, there was a lot that went into the MySpace era that was just underappreciated. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's all changed. And like Instagram having Finstas, TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, all of that fun stuff.
Yeah,
Good
now
stuff.
it's Twitch and
Which, yes, the streaming.
It's Slack and
Yeah.
it's every day there's like some new thing. I learned something every day and it's like what is that?
Real, that's like the new one.
Which one? What's it called?
Be real.
What is that?
No, I'm not going to do it any justice. And my friends that are in like content creation are going to be like, that's how you did this. It's an in real time picture that does not allow you to do filters or anything like that. So like you have to like whatever you're doing in the moment that like you basically get the notification that you can post is like what is posted and you can't like you can't like filter it or like try to make it like pretty or anything. So you're just being real. So it's called Be Real. Um,
Oh
I
yeah,
don't,
I think I've heard of that one.
yeah, I'm not too familiar with it, but it's a thing. It's like the latest social media connection picture app thing, content creation thing.
Yeah, it's too many to keep track and when I do my own content creation, I was like
Yeah,
it's just too much.
no, I understand. I feel you.
And running this account plus my business account and try to come up with something and it's like it's too much.
No.
Where can people find you?
So I have a personal Instagram account, and it is at a fabulous life, AFABALYSLIFE. And it is a very honest and real portrayal of just my life in general. But then I also do postings about different activities that I do with students, like different ideas and different ways that I set up my room, how we engage in therapy with people, and just like kind of that overall thing. So it's a junk thing. I have not moved over into a complete professional space yet. I am getting there, but you can find it under the same username on Twitter and then on Instagram at the same time. Mm-hmm.
Cool, awesome.
Yeah.
Keep up the great work.
Yep.
I'll be praying for you to get
to
June.
Yeah. And then, if anybody is ever interested in school social work, they can also feel free to reach out and talk to me about what that looks like, if they have any more direct questions. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Nah, absolutely.